Hello and welcome. Well, one minute it's sunny, then it's rainy. I don't normally need to drink for this short time, but if I make some movement over here, I think the camera will correct its lighting. Anyway, that's my naive opinion of these things. Okay, let me find the continuing with these comments and some of your questions. If I can find one in here. I saw a comment which was interesting. Oh, I don't know what I've done now. Okay, so everything's broken. There we go. Ever heard of the Roman two-headed guardian angel Janus? Well, possibly, but I can't remember the story. However, this puts me in mind of, I don't know why, I think the context in which this question came, or comment came, put me in mind of Hiri and Ottappa, whom are our Buddhist guardian angels. Hiri and Ottappa are often translated as a wise sense of dread and shame, or shame and dread. I'm not sure which way round. And they are often also personified as deities, devas, angels, and depicted by statues outside of many Buddhist temples to the right and left of the entrance door. And what they mean they are our sense of shame, although we don't really have a belief of guilt or a recognition of guilt in that sense in Buddhism, and also the fear of actually doing wrong. So it's in the context of the precepts. It is the fear of breaking precepts because of the consequences that this will involve. So I always consider Hiri and Ottappa as conscience. We have a conscience, yes? We don't want to do anything to harm others. That's within our conscience. And conscientiousness. So conscience and conscientiousness, so that fear is more positively described as conscientiousness, a wise understanding of the negative results of breaking the precepts. So whether that equates to your story of the two-headed angel, guardian angel Janus, whom I think is like we depict a devil on one shoulder, an angel on the other shoulder, one telling us to do naughty things, the other telling us to do good things, and this constant debate, I think it possibly relates to something like that. Hiri and Ottappa are both guiding us in the same direction to protect us. This is why we refer to them as guardian angels and give them this personification, to keep us from breaking the precepts. So they're very important. Now, they're not actually deities or angels, but they are very significant in our keeping of the faith in the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings. So faith, saddha, is not belief. It is confidence in the Dharma that will keep us on the straight and narrow and on the path happily towards Nibbana. By keeping sila, keeping moral precepts, we ensure that we do no harm. It's very simple. We don't kill, steal, sexual misconduct, lie, or take intoxicants. Without any of those, breach of those just five precepts, we cannot in fact do any harm to others. We may offend a little, maybe we avoid telling a white lie, to protect someone, but in the long run, we're doing that person a favour. So ultimately, we do no harm. And this is the importance of hiri and ottappa. So I thought I'd mention it as it came to mind when I saw that comment. Oh my word, this is a long, long one. Right, that'll have to be put back for later, and I might find a question in there with my highlighting pen. This is quite long, but it's interesting. My parents won't allow me to become a monk until I'm of age. So meanwhile, I was thinking of starting a YouTube channel to share my own experiences in the following of the teachings of the Buddha as a layperson. One of the 8 precepts were to not indulge in any entertainment. So I ask myself, is this entertainment? Because wanting to make these videos are one of my passions. Would I be better off just being in the shadows and studying and practicing the teachings silently myself, as opposed to broadcasting the journey to the outside world? What do you think? So it's this interesting comment. Firstly, the age, I don't know where you're from, so what you consider coming of age to be around the world, that ranges from sort of 16 to 30 years old. So, but in monastic life, you cannot be fully ordained until you're 20 years of age. But you can become a samanera, a novice monk, from the age that you are able to, on your own, scare a crow, is what it says in the Vinaya. So if you're capable of going wah, 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 and scaring off a crow, you're old enough, which is basically a toddler. So very young children can go and become novice monks, samaneras. But you cannot fully ordain until you're 20. So that you might consider, if your coming of age is 18, as it is most of the world these days, that you can't, and you're not 18 yet, let's say, then you can't ordain regardless of your parents' intention. But what is positive there, they're saying they won't allow you to become a monk until you are of age. So that's good. That means they're saying yes, and all you need is your parents' permission to go and ordain. So they're saying yes as soon as you're of age. They're probably hoping you might change your mind and become a lawyer or a doctor, something of this nature. But nevertheless, they have conceded to this coming of age, and therefore to some extent giving you some permission there. That's positive. Thinking of starting a YouTube channel. Well, what you do in the meantime is entirely up to you. You might have to earn a living, you might have to go to college and educate yourself. What that is, as long as it's within the realms of the precepts and following the Noble Eightfold Path, it really doesn't matter. There are a list of things you can and cannot do, or you cannot do, let's say specifically, as far as right livelihood is concerned. But you shouldn't consider starting a YouTube, as I'm sure you're not, as any way of making a livelihood, but to pursue your passion, as you say, hobby, of what you consider to be doing something also useful, sharing your experience with others. And, I don't see that that's too much of a problem. In answer to your specific question, would I be better off just practicing? Then I have to say yes. When you do ordain, you will not be able to be making any YouTube videos or having even a smartphone. If you go to a monastery, a proper Buddhist monastery, in my tradition, when you become a novice monk, you won't need any form of phones or access to entertainment. You will be practicing, you will be a novice monk. You will be taught what you do, how you do it, and this will not include anything to do with these forms of entertainment, as they would be considered as coming under the class of entertainment in the 8 precepts, as you quite rightly say. Much later on, when it comes to sharing the Dharma, as in my case, by accident, I began to make these videos. But it's a very small part of my monastic life. And I have been a bhikkhu for some time. I've been a practicing Buddhist for many, many years, and on 8 precepts for many, many years, although I wasn't ordained until 2020. But even then, this wasn't allowed until much later on, because you should be concentrating on your practice. This comes first and foremost. If there's room to do anything else, then you can by all means share what you're doing with others if you think it is appropriate, by whichever means you think is okay, is appropriate within the realms of the precepts and the Noble Eightfold Path. But you very wisely recognize that the wanting to do that is the kilesa, the desire, the problem. You're recognizing it's not so much it's specifically entertainment, because after all, it's not entertaining. If anything, you're entertaining others. You're not, though, are you? You're giving the opportunity. You're sharing your experience with others, giving them the opportunity to maybe learn something of your progress, or not so on the path. But I think if you were asking me, should I or shouldn't I would say just concentrate on your practice. Anything else will just be a distraction. Not so much entertainment, but a distraction possibly from practicing meditation. And if you were thinking of, if your passion was career-wise something to do with making videos for YouTube, this is not ideal subject matter. These are not popular as far as that medium, that platform is concerned. We use it in Buddhism as a very useful and good way, a platform to share the Dharma with many other people in an easy and accessible form. It is not to generate income or popularity or anything like that, because as you can see, if you look at someone just eating a plate of fried chicken or a pizza, would generate millions and millions of views. But me sitting here talking about how to become enlightened and free from suffering in this lifetime may generate just a few views, maybe 100 or so, or a few hundred or whatever. But if I was sitting here maybe drinking more drinks and eating pizzas or the local food here and talking about that in Sri Lanka, all of their wonderful curries and things, without doubt this video would have tens and tens of thousands of views. So YouTube isn't a place other than really that's associated with the practice or with Buddhism, but it is in reverse a very useful place where Buddhists can share the Dharma with each other in a relatively controlled and safe environment. I hope that answers. Anyway, a very good question, useful for many also that are young and maybe a little confused when they see something like this as to what monasticism about. Well, it isn't about this. However many YouTube videos you see of new monks being ordained and this and that and the other, when I said proper monasteries, as far as I'm concerned, if you're making a documentary about your ordination process and step by step, and it's all very beautifully professionally done, and that's by yourself, then you're not ordaining, you're not renouncing the worldly life. You're very much involved and a part of it. Maybe if someone else on the outside, in England, in the case of the UK, the BBC come along and make a documentary or a film about you, or whatever TV channel does that, that's something different. They may interview you, and that is all that happens. The rest of it is nothing that's going to affect your practice or your ordination process, or the training leading up to that, which is over many years. And there are some very good videos of that nature, done by outside resources of monasteries whom are ordaining, and they're filmed sort of over many years, the length of time that it takes. So in that sense, it's appropriate. But these sort of glitzy, highly popular, I was a monk for 10 days videos, or I was once this and now I've been a Buddhist monk for so long. Just another I climbed a mountain or I'm eating some pizza kind of video, really, because the person may be not a monk anymore, or if they are perhaps only monks because they're more, let's say, YouTubers than monkers. They're ahankarama monkeras and not monks, which are renunciants, mendicants who have given everything up to do with the world. I spoke, it's very rare, but I spoke to my son in England yesterday, and I just politely asked him if he was in touch with the family and what have you, and he answered, and he asked me the same question. I said, well, no, you're the only person I've spoken to for a long time. Because, you know, after all, this is the process. I mean, I live in another country, but these days that's not an issue. I could be on whatever, WhatsApp or FaceTime or this or that, to all of your friends and family all around the world these days without any difficulty at all and relatively cheaply. But I don't, and I'm not. And I'm very glad that most of my relatives are not that way inclined anyway. They're older, like me, or older than me. And therefore I'm left free. And in the olden days when we wrote letters back using airmail, of course communication abroad took a long time. And to some extent, for the purposes of ordination, that makes a lot of sense. And this is another good reason why smartphones, etc., is not allowed for young monks, novices, whom first are ordaining. Because after all, then they're really not changing their lives in any way, are they? Maybe I spent a bit long on that question. This I won't know, because it's a very easy, quick answer. What is your opinions on Rama Maharishi? Rama Maharishi. I have no opinions about him. I mean, I could have hazard wild guesses as to whom of many that I've read books from or looked at and studied in the past, but I'm not sure which one of those he is. They're all respected practitioners in their own field, but I'm a Buddhist monk, so have no opinions of other people's practices. That's up to them. I just follow the teachings of the Buddha. How are you, Venerable? I'm from Bangladesh. Do you have Facebook? No, I don't have Facebook. So this is very quick answers. I don't have any social media whatsoever. So that's not correct. This some people call social media. I don't think of it as such. I don't get involved. As far as the comments are concerned, I reply to your one comment when there are conversations thereafter in the comments section of this platform. I ignore those because I don't have the inclination, or I probably could find the time, but I don't make the time to look at those. They seem to go on forever sometimes. So I just respond to the question, the comment that I receive in the first line. Anything that comes thereafter is nothing to do with me. That's what I consider social media. I use WhatsApp, which I suppose could be considered social media, but that is just, for me, it is just the telephone. That's how I telephone people abroad. Here, I mean, I never telephone anybody, except, as I said just now, my son, I spoke to him. It was because he wanted to ask me about this Vipassana course he'd just been on, and he knew I'd been talking about Vipassana, and with him about Vipassana, so we were talking about meditation. Only, really. This was the point of the conversation. But other than that, and for emergencies, I don't have any call or need to use the phone. And for, once a week, or a couple of weeks, my mother or I might send each other a message, like a text, via WhatsApp. That's as far as my social media goes. I did once, for a very brief period, have a Facebook thing, a long time ago, but deleted it quite quickly. And I would discourage anyone who's practicing seriously, unless it's an essential part of their working life or their income, that review it and look, and is it really necessary to be having... Most comments I receive with regards to social media are negative, in the sense people are saying, oh, well, you wouldn't believe the things that I've heard on social media, and this person said this to that, and about this and that and the other. It doesn't seem to be a very positive environment for discussion or forum for discussion. But I do also recognize that there are some very useful Buddhist forums for discussion on that platform and other social media platforms. I just haven't needed or wanted or had the inclination to get involved with them myself. Now, this is a bit more to the point, this question. What's your favourite spoke of the Noble Eightfold Path, and is right view beholding from true self or anything else? So sometimes they say, people would say favourite spoke, because the Noble Eightfold Path is depicted as a wheel with 8 divisions, the 8 parts of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is a good way to see it. It also does come full circle, but in that sense also, each point, each spoke, or each segment is rather dependent on the other. We have a tendency in Theravada Buddhism to divide or to categorize the 8 spokes, 8 points, parts of the Noble Eightfold Path into just 3 categories of sila, moral virtue, and that would include right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, so 4 parts of it. Right meditation, which would include right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi, right meditation. And then panya, sila, samadhi, panya, which is wisdom, which is right view. And you're actually saying here, right view. Is it beholding from true self? Right view, I don't know what you mean by beholding from true self. Right view is having no doubt in the Four Noble Truths, understanding that there is karma, that is, we are the results of causes and conditions that we put in place. Karma means action. Vipaka, karma vipaka, means the results of those actions, which leads to the what we believe we are at the moment in this time. So we develop this sense of what we call self, and you say, is right view beholding from true self? Right view is also encompassing the characteristics of existence, which are anicca, dukkha, anatta. That is anicca, that all things are impermanent. Dukkha, everything is suffering or unsatisfactory. And anatta, which means not self or no self. Therefore, I usually say that is everything is out of our control, being that all conditioned things are subject to anicca, dukkha, and are uncontrollable, like the weather out here or this building is here now, it won't be forever. Even the Himalaya range of mountains won't be there forever. One day they weren't before, they were not there once, and one day in the future they will not be there again. Everything, all conditioned things are impermanent, right down to sort of planets and universes. But self itself is so transient and so evident. You are one time a child, then an adult, and then an old person. You may be in education, then working, and then retired. All of these aspects of one's life are considered by some through avijja, which is ignorance or lack of understanding, to be what you really are. But when you were a school child and believed you were a school child, that's what you were in education. You're not now as an adult or someone working, or if you're retired, someone who's retired. Your life, your persona is continually changing as a result of the causes and conditions surrounding you, most of which you put in place yourself. And if, based on sila, moral virtue, will be conducive to creating what is a good person, whom will continue to act with body, speech and mind in wholesome ways, skillful ways, doing no harm, and therefore creating better causes and conditions for the next moment and the next personification of those results of your actions. But this is not a self, it's impermanent. This body is not yours. So is right view saying they're not self? Yes, it is, if that's what you mean. My favourite spoke is none, because they all rely on each other. You need sila, moral virtue, to be able to have samadhi, meditation, just to use the three categories to sum it up. And it's through samadhi meditation that you develop wisdom. But if you are unable to keep sila, it's demonstrating a lack of wisdom. But with wisdom, you will be able to keep sila. You will be able to meditate. Without meditation, sila will be more difficult, wisdom will be more difficult. So each of the spokes is equally important. So therefore I don't have a favourite. My favourite is its holistic, the holistic path, the whole wheel, all of the spokes together. If I had a bicycle and was riding a bicycle, I wouldn't say that I preferred my favourite wheel as the front one, because I need the front one and the back one in order to ride the bicycle. Without one of them, there's no point having any wheels. You need them all. And this is what gets so often forgotten, especially in Buddhist countries, actually, that there is three parts to the Noble Eightfold Path. There are three parts to the Noble Eightfold Path. Without meditation, it doesn't matter. You can practice as much sila and develop as much wisdom as you like. This is not what the Buddha taught as being the path to Nibbana. And it's often considered that, well, if you make enough merit, this is sufficient. But you really have to experience yourself a glimpse of Nibbana within this lifetime if you hope to eventually attain to enlightenment and be free from rebirth and attain to and experience Nibbana and attain to Nibbana eventually. Without meditation, or without sila, or without the development of of wholesome mind states and the reduction of unwholesome mind states, without one of those parts, the other two parts cannot will work. They're good. I mean, it's very good, and you can attain to great things, but not the final goal of freedom from suffering in this lifetime, leading to deathlessness or not rebirth. So yes, well, there we are. That's a good question. Right. Oh, very long. Oh, okay. I haven't highlighted anything, but I've been practicing in this tradition for almost 10 years as a layperson. One thing I've noticed is that monks rarely talk about the life they lived before ordination, or that period of time when they came to realize ordination would be the route to go, and how that affected everything while still in lay life. It's always been something I wonder about, and also wonder why it's talked about so little. So, as far as our former lives are concerned, as renunciants, they are what we've renounced. So if you're a nurse or a ballerina, I'm quoting real examples, those monks, those nuns, or actor, famous actors even, film stars, pop stars even, there are monks. But you never hear of this, no, because we are renunciants. This previous life we have renounced. It doesn't come into the equation anymore. But I understand what you're saying. What is of interest to you is the little bit between that and ordaining. And this was of interest to me also. So for myself, I had to experience that. So I was a businessman, but then I renounced everything and lived on the 8 precepts for some years, many years. And part of that meant that I took it as far as giving up household life and going, mainly spending a lot of time in Thailand, but then ultimately actually living alone in an isolated place in just an old van, not a camping van or mobile home, but a very old van, on my own for 3 years as a renunciant, a hermit, on 8 precepts, observing those, learning and reading the suttas, learning about Buddhism where I could, listening to Dharma, visiting monasteries, but not staying, always staying alone, except for the odd few days or whatever, where I'd be in a monastery or go to Thailand for some time or whatever. But for the large part of that 3 years I was alone, and during that time I'd made the decision I wanted to ordain, but the practicality of it was that I couldn't at that time. I still had responsibilities. There are certain conditions we have to meet before we can ordain. Getting on a bit as well, being in my late 40s, late 40s then. We have, at that time of life, a lot of kilesas to work on. So I thought I'm better off practicing a very ascetic life alone and eroding these kilesas, these hindrances to my practice, by really sheer, hard, determined work and just practice, and not getting involved in too much of a community life and new duties and responsibilities at that time. So that was the sort of changeover period. I was also looking for somewhere, a life halfway between, as many people are. So not a lay life, not ordaining as a monk, somewhere in between. I found after a few years there is not somewhere in between. You're always in that twilight zone, grey area. You're not a lay person really. You don't consider yourself as a lay person. You don't consider yourself, or you're not considered as a monk, and therefore you're still having a lot of self going on with yourself, thinking, well, I'm not this, I'm not that, because you haven't renounced, you haven't given up responsibility to the world. When you ordain, so you give up your clothes, your hair, your identity, and all responsibility is taken away from you. You're dependent on others, lay people and your sangha. Then you've physically, if not mentally, let go of the outside world. This is renunciation. So there is then a cut-off point. And this is why perhaps, I don't know, but this is possibly why perhaps monks don't speak of it often, because they've renounced that. So they might have been a very good nurse, a very famous pop star or movie celebrity or whatever, but it's irrelevant now. That's what they were, it is not what they are. You don't, say you're the manager of the local bank, you probably don't, well maybe you do. I was going to say you probably don't harp on about your school days and how good you were at geography or something like that, but maybe some people do. I can think of some examples actually, so that's a bad analogy. But generally speaking, what you're doing now is what's important. And in Buddhism, we focus all of our attention onto the present moment, here and now. The past is the past, it cannot be changed. It could be also that one might have had an unsavory background of some nature. It doesn't mean if you were a criminal, if you've paid your debt to society or something like that, you cannot ordain and become a monk. Angulimala, for example, whom killed 999 people and was about to kill his 1000th, being the Buddha, and was stopped in his tracks. And I'll cut a long story short, he became a monk, had to pay a lot of bad karma, but eventually an arahant. Because it is relevant. As far as the Buddha is concerned, this was the past. We are responsible for our actions of the past through karma. We will suffer the consequences of those actions. So hopefully you make the determination to only do good from here in after, and stick to the precepts, and the past is therefore irrelevant. So whether you were rich and successful, or down and out and poor, famous or not famous, fit and healthy or sick and unwell, as long as you've recovered now and you've become a monk, that's all that matters, what you are now. And each and every monk, each and every nun, they're all the same. They wear the same clothes, they have the same hairstyle, look the same, do the same. There's no real hierarchy of jobs and duties. Even the abbots of monasteries and most senior monks, we all see sweeping, cleaning, doing the day-to-day duties around the monastery along with the novices. So it's much, there's some hierarchy to some extent in terms of seniority through the number of years you've been in the robes, but not even our bodily years. So if you're ordained late in life, as I did in my late 40s, 50s, whatever, some of the people who are half my age can still be considerably more senior than me in monastic life, because they've been in the robes since they were, say, age 20. And if they are now 30 or something like that, they've been in the robes for 10 years. If I ordained at, say, 40 and was in the robes, you know what I mean. I'm getting all my maths mixed up here. So I wasn't in my previous life a great mathematician, although that was my job. My work was figures. So I didn't look at these questions before, did I? Because they're all very long. They seem it to me anyway. Right. Oh, this is interesting because it kind of relates to the last question. I have been meditating almost daily these days, and yes, I can feel my hindrances getting lesser than before. I'm getting invaded by insects. And yes, I can feel my hindrances getting lesser than before. Thank you so much. Well, no, the practice is down to you. You don't need to thank me. I'm only happy that whatever I've said is useful. The only other question I have is exactly how long did it take for you to feel meditation changing your life? Thinking, ? Like you were starting to crave less for sensual desire or giving up feelings of restlessness since you had started meditating in the van. Thank you so much. Peace. Yeah, so it's funny that relates to the van. I've just mentioned the van, isn't it? Well, I started meditating quite a long time before I went to live on my own in a van, and if I hadn't have started meditating a long time before that, I would not have been able to have lived in the van. In fact, I'd been meditating for 5 years before I went to live in. I gave everything up, went into homelessness. So that's how I saw the change in my life through meditation. From, say, 2012 to 2017, I was practicing meditation daily and gradually eroding the kilesas, gradually, as you describe here, seeing how the hindrances affect me less, and eventually actually realizing and seeing the importance of the three characteristics of anicca, dukkha, anatta, and the unimportance of my materialistic life as it was before. I no longer saw the need for the comforts that I had, the surroundings I was living in, the entertainment I was engaged in, the consuming that I undertook, even the travel, other than to just only a monastery in a place, albeit in a different country. It was out of necessity that I'd go there because it was a good place for me to practice. Other than that, I reduced everything down to the very bare minimum, including my work to the very bare minimum. This all came gradually over a period of about 5 years through my meditation. But that is no way to measure or guess how long these things take. We are all different. As I said earlier, the older you are, perhaps the more kilesas you've built up. There's an expression in English, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, meaning that an old dog has learnt its way of living, and it's hard to teach it, to train it. Whereas a puppy, a new dog, you can train more easily. And this is quite true, it's human nature. The same with practice. With older people, it perhaps takes longer. But, however, what that's not taking into account is past lives and experience and past karma. If one has had experience of meditation in past lives, then you'll fall into it very easily. If you haven't, then it will take a lot longer. So this is a question the Buddha said not to try and use as a means to calculate anything or understand. That is the results of karma and past karma, because it is far too complex and too broad-ranging a subject and subject to too many conditions for the human mind to successfully get all of the aspects that need to be considered into one place to work out an answer without it literally splitting in two, were his words. So this is one of the what's the word? Forgotten the word, Pali word for these imponderable questions. So everybody's different. So how long I took and how long did it take for me to see a difference, it really doesn't matter. But immediately that I started meditation, immediately I saw a difference. Otherwise I would not. The nature of my mind at that time was such that if it didn't interest me, I wouldn't have continued with it. Even with the determination I had to meditate, I'd heard it was a good thing. If I didn't see results in a very short time, I would, as I know what my mentality was like at that time, back in 2012 or something like that, I would not have pursued it or found it at all of any interest. But as I immediately sensed a sense of doing something useful, in terms of my mind was becoming more calm and my body was becoming more relaxed, I felt that there were results there which in themselves encouraged me to continue. And as I'm still here, continuing with that practice, and have gone from that van to ordination and then have travelled as a monk, living homelessly, and even outside as a monk for most of the 3 years in India, I was living just under the stars outside, or in some very unusual places, just staying occasionally in my monasteries there. More lately, I've been in these kind of places, kutis, because it's not acceptable in all countries. Probably, I think India these days is one of the few countries where you can very easily, and maybe nowadays even in the last few years that's changed, but when I first arrived there in 2020, you could still I found where I was, it was quite easy just to live outside and nobody would be disturbed by that. Here it's perhaps a little bit different, and Thailand nowadays as a Buddhist monk, because they want to look after you, they don't want to see you vulnerable. India is not a Buddhist country anymore, so they just see you as another homeless wandering mendicant, of which there are many of many different religions. So nobody has much concern, as they give you quite a lot of respect. They'll even feed you, but they're not worried that you're sleeping outside. It's seen as something quite normal there. But that was only possible, having had a very comfortable life previously, because I'd found something far more nutritional value in meditation than anything that I'd ever experienced in my life leading up to that point. So it was almost instantaneous, but then a very gradual erosion of the kilesas that comes and is still ongoing, work in progress to date, as you'll find yourself. Well, I think that answers your question. I won't read it again. And I think for now, that is I can't seem to get it to go any further into the next question, so maybe that's the end of the questions for now, the comments. So obviously a very good time to bring this little talk to a close. I hope there is something of interest there that you can use, and indeed if you feel so inclined, share with others if it's appropriate. or if not, just let it go and don't worry about it. But please try and join me again. It is a case that I'm always jumping from one subject to another, and often, like some of these questions about what led me to becoming a monk and the experience of my life leading up to that and how things are going now, will be a part of the answer. I don't read particularly, there was a comment which didn't come up here, there was a comment about relating to suttas, where I quoted a sutta, could I read or could I quote more suttas? Well, that comment came as a result of a video where I explained why I don't do that. So maybe watch the video again if you were the subscriber that commented about me quoting more of the suttas. Firstly, I don't know them all off by heart, but I don't use the suttas too much in speaking, just quoting them or reading them all out, because there are many monks doing that very well here on YouTube, that you can listen to all of the suttas, also the commentaries and in-depth discussions on various suttas and analysis. I don't do that because my view is that apart from that's being done, I do listen to those. I find it a very good way for me to listen to suttas and refresh my memory of them, and also listen to the interesting discussions sometimes about them. So they're very good, but I don't do that because I reserve this for just sharing with you my experience of putting what we learn in those suttas, which is essentially the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, the practice of Buddhism, into practice in my monastic life, and how that also relates to you in your lay life, how the practice is used, how the understanding of the characteristics of existence can lead us to happiness, ultimately happily along the path towards Nibbana, following the Noble Eightfold Path. So that is why I don't quote the suttas too often, because we can all have access these days to read them for ourselves. In the Christian religion, for instance, they like to quote the Bible all the time, and in the sermons in church have readings from the Bible. And I've always found that part of it rather boring when I used to go to those sort of services, and used to look forward to hearing the vicar or priest giving a sermon, his own putting into practice of those teachings. Of whatever it may be, Jesus or whatever religion you're talking about, the actual use of those teachings. Because if we're there, it's probably the case we've already read the Bible, or we've already read the suttas, we know about them, what they're teaching. How do you now use that is what I think is more useful for me, and I'm better able to do that, share with you, than I am to sit here reading a book, which you can just read yourself in your own language, as I can, and I do. So I hope that's helpful and useful, and thank you for watching. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu. Wow, a lot of little insects.